You people have been getting away with special treatment long enough. Victoria Ashford's voice cut through the afternoon picnic like a blade. 60 neighbors turned to watch. The HOA president stood blocking the pathway, designer sunglasses perched on her head, arms crossed over her silk blouse. Below her, Elena Reed sat motionless in her motorized wheelchair, disabled placard visible on the dashboard of the van parked 15 feet away. "That's not a disability spot," Victoria continued, louder now. "You're abusing guest parking privileges." Elena kept her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly on the armrests. "The bylaws allow disabled placard holders to use any non-reserved space. I checked before. I don't care what you think the rules are." Victoria stepped closer. "This community has standards." Then she grabbed the wheelchair handles. She yanked backward, hard. The motorized chair lurched. Elena's hand slipped from the controller. The chair started rolling backward down the slight incline toward the parking lot, picking up speed. Elena screamed, "By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below." Because what nobody at that picnic knew, what Victoria Ashford had no way of knowing, was that the quiet custodian in the work boots 50 feet away had spent 12 years prosecuting exactly this kind of violence for the Department of Justice. And his wife, the woman coming home that evening, wore a judge's robe to work every single day. This isn't just about an HOA dispute. It's about the moment a man who chose peace over power remembered why he'd learned to fight in the first place. Marcus Reed was carrying a trash bag when he heard his sister scream. He dropped everything and ran. His work boots hit pavement hard, closing the distance in seconds. He caught the wheelchair 3 feet from the curb, his hands gripping the handles tight enough to leave marks. The chair stopped. Elena was gasping, her whole body shaking. "I've got you," Marcus said quietly. "You're okay. I've got you." Iris appeared beside them, his 9-year-old daughter sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. She'd been helping Elena navigate to the accessible playground when Victoria started the confrontation. Now she clung to her aunt's chair, her face buried against Elena's arm. Marcus looked up at Victoria. She stood 10 feet away, her expression caught between shock and defiance. "She was blocking the accessible route," Victoria said quickly, her voice pitched for the crowd. "I was helping. You assaulted my sister." Marcus's voice was low, controlled. "In front of my daughter, in front of everyone here. Oh, please." Victoria's shock was already hardening into aggression. "You're being dramatic. If she's really disabled, she should be more careful about where she—" "Careful?" Something in Marcus's tone made Victoria step back. "You want to talk about being careful?" The crowd had formed a loose circle around them. 60 people who'd been enjoying pulled pork and potato salad 30 seconds ago. Some looked horrified, others uncomfortable. A few were already edging away because getting involved was inconvenient. Robert Chen, a retired civil engineer with white hair and steady hands, approached from the side. He held up his phone. "I have video," he said to Marcus. "All of it." Victoria's face flushed red. "This is absurd. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for Monday morning to address the Reed family's ongoing disruptions to community harmony." She turned to address the crowd, voice rising. 2 years of violations, 2 years of special treatment and entitlement. If you don't like how this neighborhood is run, you're free to leave." Marcus was still kneeling beside Elena's chair. His hands were shaking. He looked at his sister, humiliated, her dignity stripped in front of strangers. At Iris, whose tears were soaking into Elena's sleeve. At the neighbors, most of whom were already turning away, heading back to their plates and conversations. For 2 years, he'd absorbed every petty citation Victoria had sent, every condescending comment about his work boots on the porch, about Elena's wheelchair ramp being aesthetically inconsistent, about their family lowering the neighborhood tone. He'd told himself that keeping the peace mattered more than fighting back, that staying invisible kept them safe. He'd been wrong. Marcus stood slowly. He helped Elena straighten her chair, checked that the controller was working properly. He picked up Iris and held her until her crying quieted to hiccups. Then he looked directly at Victoria. "We're not going anywhere," he said. Victoria's smile was thin and sharp. "We'll see about that Monday." She walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement. The crowd dispersed. The picnic resumed. Within 5 minutes, it was like nothing had happened. But Marcus stood there, his daughter in his arms and his sister's hand gripping his, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. He'd spent 2 years being a custodian, a caregiver, a quiet presence in a neighborhood that barely noticed him. Monday morning, Victoria Ashford was going to learn who he used to be. The house was quiet when they got home. Marcus helped Elena up the ramp and into the living room, while Iris went straight to her room without being asked. He could hear her crying through the door, soft, muffled sounds that made his chest tight. Elena wheeled herself to the couch and transferred over, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for 7 years. "I'm fine," she said before Marcus could ask. "Really, I've dealt with worse. You shouldn't have to deal with any of it." Marcus sat in the armchair across from her. His custodial uniform still smelled like trash bags and industrial cleaner. Not from her, not from anyone. Elena was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do Monday?" "I don't know yet." But even as he said it, Marcus felt something stirring in the back of his mind. Old instincts, patterns of thought he'd deliberately buried 3 years ago, when he'd left the Department of Justice and taken a job that required nothing from him except showing up and cleaning. After Elena went to her room to rest, Marcus walked into the kitchen. He stood at the sink, staring out the window at Victoria's house 3 streets over, the largest property in Willowbrook, the one with the professionally maintained lawn and the fountain in the front yard that violated the same water restriction bylaws she'd cited against other residents. He opened the drawer beneath the coffee maker. Inside were 2 years of documentation, every HOA violation notice Victoria had sent, every email exchange, every photograph he'd taken of comparable infractions she'd ignored. He'd been collecting evidence without quite admitting to himself why. Old habits from his prosecutorial days. Document everything, assume nothing, build the case before you need it. Marcus pulled out the folders and spread them across the kitchen table. By the time Cassandra came home 3 hours later, the entire surface was covered. She stopped in the doorway, still wearing her court attire, charcoal suit, judicial pin on the lapel. She took in the scene, Marcus sitting at the table surrounded by organized evidence, his laptop open to a spreadsheet tracking incidents by date and type, sticky notes color-coded by violation category. "You're building a case," she said quietly. She put her hands on Elena. Marcus didn't look up. "Dragged her wheelchair, made my daughter watch her aunt get assaulted. And I stood there, Cass. I stood there for 2 years watching her bully my family because I thought keeping the peace mattered more than fighting." Cassandra set down her briefcase and sat across from him. She picked up one of the folders, October 2023, citations for Elena's wheelchair ramp. She read through Victoria's emails claiming the ramp violated aesthetic standards, then Marcus's research showing no such bylaw existed. "This is federal housing discrimination," Cassandra said. "Clear ADA violation." "I know." Marcus pulled up another folder. January 2024, holiday decoration enforcement. She cited us for removing decorations 1 day late. Her friend Patricia kept hers up for 2 weeks. No citation. He slid over photographic evidence, timestamps matching the dates. Disparate treatment based on disability status and economic profiling. Cassandra was reading like a judge now, her eyes scanning for legal sufficiency. "You've documented pattern and practice." Marcus finally looked at her. "I was good at this once, building cases, finding the patterns people thought they had hidden, making the evidence speak louder than any testimony." His voice cracked slightly. "Then Mom and Dad died, and Elena needed me, and I just walked away from all of it. I told myself I was choosing family. That being present mattered more than being important. You didn't walk away." Cassandra reached across the table and took his hand. "You shifted priorities. There's a difference." "Is there?" Marcus gestured at the folders. "Because I've been collecting this evidence for 2 years, like I was still building federal cases. Except I never did anything with it. I just kept my head down, let her push us around, taught Iris that the way you deal with bullies is to be quiet and hope they get bored." "What changed?" Iris's face. Marcus's jaw tightened. "When Elena screamed and that chair started rolling, Iris looked at me like I could fix it, like I was supposed to protect them. And I did. I caught the chair. But then Victoria kept talking and everyone kept walking away, and I saw Iris realize that catching someone isn't the same as protecting them." Cassandra squeezed his hand. "What do you need?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled his laptop closer and opened a new document. "I need to stop hiding from what I'm good at. If you believe people should be judged by their character, not their job title, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story is just getting started." He started typing. Cassandra watched him work, recognizing the shift in his posture, the focus in his eyes. This wasn't the exhausted custodian who came home every evening smelling like cleaning solution. This was the attorney who'd built his reputation on meticulous preparation and ironclad evidence. "She called an emergency meeting for Monday," Marcus said, still typing. "She's going to try to make this about us. Paint our family as disruptive, entitled, refusing to follow community standards. Let her." Cassandra stood and moved to his side of the table. She looked over his shoulder at what he was typing, a timeline of every discriminatory incident, cross-referenced with bylaw citations and photographic evidence. Let her build her case in front of witnesses, then show them what a real case looks like. Marcus saved the document. Then he pulled out his phone and texted Robert Chen. "Can you send me that video from today?" The response came 30 seconds later. "Already did. Sent to your email 10 minutes ago. Also, I'll testify Monday if you need me to." Marcus showed Cassandra the message. She smiled. "You're not alone in this." "I know." Marcus looked at the evidence spread across their kitchen table. 2 years of systematic harassment. 2 years of a woman abusing the small power she had because she'd never encountered someone who knew how to dismantle that kind of abuse professionally. He'd left the Department of Justice to be present for Elena, to give Iris a father who came home every night, to stop spending his life prosecuting injustice and start just living. But some things you don't stop being, even when you stop doing them. Monday morning, Victoria Ashford was going to learn that the custodian she'd been tormenting for 2 years had forgotten more about civil rights law than she'd ever known about running an HOA. And this time, when his family needed protecting, Marcus wasn't going to just catch them. He was going to make sure they never needed catching again. Sunday morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through the kitchen windows. Marcus had been awake since 5, organizing evidence into presentation order. The folders were now arranged chronologically, each incident documented with photographs, email chains, and corresponding bylaw citations that proved Victoria's enforcement was selective at best, discriminatory at worst. Cassandra came downstairs in her weekend clothes, jeans and a faded law school sweatshirt. She poured coffee and sat beside him, reviewing his work with the critical eye of someone who'd spent 15 years evaluating evidence from the bench. "This section here," she said, tapping a folder labeled March 2024. "You cite the bylaw she violated by targeting Elena's medical equipment. But you need to show the comparison more clearly. Who else has external equipment that she ignored?" Marcus pulled up photos on his laptop. "Patterson, 3 houses down. Her AC unit registers at 72 decibels. Elena's oxygen concentrator is 45. Victoria filed a noise complaint against us. Nothing against Patterson." "Patterson's in her book club," Cassandra noted. "Add that context. It shows the discrimination isn't just about disability. It's about social circles and who she considers worthy of living here." Marcus made the notation. This was how they'd always worked best, even back when they were dating, and he'd bring case files home. Cassandra had a gift for finding the weaknesses prosecutors missed, the gaps that needed filling before trial. Elena wheeled into the kitchen around 9. She'd clearly been crying. Her eyes were puffy, her usual morning composure absent. She poured herself tea and sat at the table, looking at the evidence spread across the surface. "Is this everything?" she asked quietly. 2 years' worth. Marcus turned the laptop so she could see the timeline. Every citation, every email, every time she enforced rules against us that she ignored for other residents. Elena scrolled through the documentation. Her hand trembled slightly on the mouse. "I didn't realize you'd been keeping track of all of this." "Old habits?" Marcus watched her face. "I told myself I was just documenting in case we needed it someday. But really, I think part of me never stopped being a prosecutor. I just stopped practicing." "Why didn't you use it before?" Elena's voice was soft. "Before yesterday, I mean. You had proof she was targeting us." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Because I thought if we just kept our heads down, if we didn't make waves, she'd eventually leave us alone. I thought being invisible was safer than fighting back. And now Iris watched her aunt get dragged out of a wheelchair, and I realized I was teaching my daughter the wrong lesson. Marcus met Elena's eyes. I was teaching her that dignity is something you surrender to avoid conflict, that people like Victoria get to win because fighting back is too hard. Elena reached across the table and gripped his hand. You gave up everything for me, Marcus. Your career, your salary, your whole life in D.C. You became a custodian so you could take me to physical therapy appointments and manage my care. I never wanted you to have to fight my battles too. You're my sister. Marcus squeezed back. And this isn't just your battle anymore. Victoria made it about all of us when she humiliated you in front of Iris. Cassandra stood and retrieved something from her briefcase in the hallway. She returned with a legal pad covered in notes. I did some research last night. If Marcus files a fair housing complaint with HUD, the investigation won't just examine individual incidents. They'll audit the entire HOA's enforcement practices going back years. How far back? Elena asked. Typically 3 years, sometimes 5, if they find evidence of systemic discrimination. Cassandra sat back down. Every decision Victoria made as board president would be scrutinized. Every citation, every approval or denial of modification requests, every enforcement action. If they find a pattern of discrimination, the HOA could face significant fines and mandatory oversight. Marcus pulled up another document on his laptop, a draft complaint he'd started at 2 a.m. I'm not trying to bankrupt the neighborhood. Most of these people are decent. They just didn't want to get involved yesterday because standing up to Victoria seemed like too much trouble. So what's the goal? Elena asked. Accountability. Marcus turned the laptop so both women could see the complaint. I want her to resign. I want her to acknowledge what she did. And I want to make sure she can't do this to anyone else. Iris appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas. She'd been so quiet they hadn't heard her coming downstairs. Daddy, why are you wearing your sad face? Marcus opened his arms, and she climbed into his lap. Too big for this, really, but still small enough that he could hold her. I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about tomorrow. The meeting where the mean lady has to say sorry. Something like that. Iris looked at the papers spread across the table. Is this because of what she did to Aunt Elena? Yes. Good. Iris's voice was fierce in a way that made Marcus's chest ache. She was really mean, and nobody helped except Mr. Chen. I know, baby. Are you going to make her stop being mean? Marcus looked at Cassandra, then at Elena. Both women nodded slightly. He turned back to his daughter. Yes, I'm going to make her stop. How? Well, Marcus said carefully. Before I worked at the community center, I had a different job. I helped people when someone was treating them unfairly because of who they were or what they looked like, or because they were different. Iris's eyes widened. Like a superhero? More like a lawyer. I worked for the government, and my job was to make sure people followed rules that protect others from being hurt or left out. Why did you stop? Because Grandma and Grandpa died, and Aunt Elena needed help, and being your dad was more important than any job. Marcus brushed hair out of her eyes. But sometimes, the things you learn don't go away just because you're not doing them anymore. So, you're going to use your old job to stop the mean lady? Yes. Iris hugged him tight. I think that's good. Aunt Elena was really scared yesterday. After Iris went back upstairs, the 3 adults sat in silence for a moment. Then Cassandra spoke. You know, once you do this, there's no going back, right? Even if Victoria resigns, people will know who you used to be, what you're capable of. Marcus looked at the evidence he'd compiled, 2 years of meticulous documentation, organized with the precision of someone who'd never really stopped being an attorney. Maybe it's time they knew. Elena wheeled closer. I can contribute too. I've kept records of every interaction, every time she made comments about my disability or implied I was faking it for special treatment. If you need testimony, I'll need everything. Marcus pulled up a fresh document. Statements, documentation, anything that shows pattern and practice. This isn't just about Saturday. It's about proving she's been systematically targeting our family because we don't fit her vision of what Willowbrook should be. They worked through the afternoon. Elena provided her documentation, screenshots of neighborhood social media posts where Victoria had made veiled comments about certain residents lowering property values, emails demanding medical proof of Elena's disability despite the visible wheelchair, passive-aggressive messages about the inconvenience of accessible parking. By evening, Marcus had assembled a presentation that would have made his old supervisors at the DOJ proud. Timeline, evidence, legal citations, witness statements, and video proof of assault. Tomorrow morning, Victoria Ashford was walking into what she thought was a neighborhood dispute. She had no idea she was walking into a federal case. Monday morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Marcus woke at 6 to find Cassandra already dressed for court, drinking coffee at the kitchen counter. She had sentencing hearings scheduled all morning, a calendar she couldn't rearrange on short notice. But she'd promised to come to the HOA meeting as soon as she could break free. "You ready for this?" she asked as Marcus poured his own coffee. "I haven't argued a case in 3 years. He looked down at his hands, noticing they were steadier than he'd expected. "But yeah, I'm ready." Cassandra kissed him before leaving. "Remember? Let her talk first. Let her commit to her version of events before you dismantle it." After she left, Marcus got Iris ready for school. His daughter was quieter than usual, picking at her breakfast cereal without her normal chatter about weekend plans or playground drama. "You okay, sweetheart?" Marcus asked, sitting beside her. "Are people going to be mean to you today, like they were to Aunt Elena?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "Some people might not like what I have to say, but sometimes doing the right thing means people get uncomfortable." "Will the mean lady yell at you?" "Maybe, probably." Marcus smiled slightly. "But I've dealt with people a lot meaner than Mrs. Ashford." After dropping Iris at school, Marcus returned home to change. He stood in front of his closet, looking at the custodial uniform hanging on one side and the suits pushed to the back on the other. Cassandra had pulled one out yesterday, charcoal gray, the same one he'd worn to his exit interview at the Department of Justice 3 years ago. He put it on slowly. The fabric felt foreign now, too formal, too much like a costume. But when he looked in the mirror, something shifted. His posture straightened, his jaw set differently. He looked like the attorney he used to be. Elena was waiting in the living room when he came downstairs. She'd dressed carefully too, professional blouse, her best wheelchair cushion, hair pulled back neatly, making herself as credible as possible because she knew how these things worked. Disabled people always had to prove themselves twice as hard. "You look official," she said. "Feel weird." Marcus grabbed his laptop bag and the accordion folder containing all his evidence. "Like I'm putting on someone else's skin. Or remembering your own." They drove to the community center in silence. Marcus parked in the employee lot out of habit, then realized he should have used the main entrance. Small details. He was already thinking like a custodian instead of someone about to prosecute a case. Inside, the main meeting room was filling up. Marcus counted at least 40 residents, more than he'd expected for a Monday morning. News of Saturday's incident had spread. People came out of curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe just hunger for drama. Victoria sat at the front table with her 4 board members: Stephen, the mortgage broker, Patricia, her book club friend, David, a retired accountant, and Jennifer, whose teenage son had spray-painted graffiti on the community center wall last summer without consequences. Victoria's people, her appointed allies. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. Her hair was styled perfectly. She looked like someone in control, someone who belonged in positions of authority. Marcus helped Elena to a spot near the middle of the room, then walked to the back. He set his laptop bag down quietly. Several people glanced at him, then did double takes. He wasn't in his custodial uniform. A few whispered to each other. Robert Chen was there, sitting near the front with his phone visible on the table. He caught Marcus's eye and nodded once, a silent confirmation that the video was ready. At 9 o'clock exactly, Victoria called the meeting to order. She tapped her gavel twice, unnecessary and performative. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. We're here to address a serious matter involving ongoing violations and disruptive behavior by the Reed household." Marcus stayed in the back, listening, letting her build her narrative. "For 2 years," Victoria continued, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality, "this board has attempted to work cooperatively with the Reed family regarding numerous community standards violations. We've issued citations, sent reminder emails, offered opportunities for compliance. Instead of cooperation, we've received hostility and accusations of unfair treatment. Several residents shifted uncomfortably. They'd seen the wheelchair incident. This framing didn't match what they had witnessed. Saturday's incident, Victoria said, her tone shifting to wounded innocence, has been grossly mischaracterized. Mrs. Reed's wheelchair was blocking an accessible pathway during a community event. As board president, I attempted to assist in relocating her to a safer position. The response from her family was a physical altercation and threats of legal action. Marcus kept his expression neutral. She was lying to 40 witnesses, many of whom had watched the assault happen. Bold strategy, stupid but bold. The Reed family has consistently demanded special accommodations that other residents don't receive, Victoria went on. Extended parking privileges, exemptions from landscaping standards, delayed response times for violation corrections. This board has tried to be understanding regarding Mrs. Elena Reed's disability, but accommodation cannot become preferential treatment that undermines community cohesion. Elena's hands tightened on her armrests. Marcus could see her fighting to stay quiet. Therefore, Victoria said, this emergency meeting is to establish formal guidelines for future interactions and determine whether the Reed household can continue residing in Willowbrook Estates under current bylaws or whether their pattern of non-compliance necessitates further action up to and including. Point of order. Robert Chen stood, his voice cutting through Victoria's momentum. Before we discuss any actions against the Reed family, I'd like to present video evidence of Saturday's incident. I think everyone here deserves to see what actually happened. Victoria's smile tightened. Mr. Chen, we've already established the facts. You've established your version. Robert pulled out his phone. I have video of the actual events. 30 people here witnessed it. They deserve to see it again before we make any decisions. Stephen, the mortgage broker, leaned forward. I think that's fair, Victoria. If we're discussing disciplinary action, we should review all available evidence. Victoria's jaw clenched, but she was trapped. Refusing would look like she was hiding something. Fine, Mr. Chen, you have 2 minutes. Robert connected his phone to the projector. The screen lit up with shaky footage of the picnic, children playing, adults chatting, the normalcy of Saturday afternoon. Then the angle shifted to Elena's wheelchair near the guest parking, Victoria approaching. The audio was clear enough to catch her words. You people have been getting away with special treatment long enough. The room went silent. The video continued. Victoria's escalating aggression, Elena's calm responses citing bylaw specifics. Then Victoria's hands on the wheelchair handles, the backward yank, the chair rolling, Elena's scream, Marcus running, Iris sobbing. When it ended, no one spoke. Victoria's face had gone pale. That video is taken out of context. You can't see that she was blocking. I can see you assault a disabled woman, Robert said quietly. Everyone in this room can see it. Marcus stood. Every eye in the room turned to him. He picked up his laptop bag and the accordion folder of evidence. Then he walked to the front of the room. Victoria's expression shifted from defensive to contemptuous. Mr. Reed, unless you're here to apologize for Saturday's disruption, I'm here to present evidence, Marcus said calmly. He set the folder on the board table. 2 years of documentation regarding systematic discrimination and selective bylaw enforcement against my household. You can't just, yes, I can. Marcus opened his laptop, his movements precise and professional. This is a formal HOA meeting to discuss my family's residency. I have every right to present relevant evidence. Unless you'd like to add denial of due process to the list of violations I'm documenting. Victoria stared at him, really looked at him for the first time. The suit, the bearing, the way he just cited procedural law without hesitation. Who are you? She asked, and there was finally uncertainty in her voice. Marcus smiled slightly. Let's find out. Marcus opened the accordion folder with deliberate calm. He pulled out the first document, a citation dated October 2023, and placed it on the table where everyone could see. October 15th, 2 years ago, he began, his voice carrying the measured authority of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. My sister Elena received a violation notice regarding her wheelchair ramp. The citation claimed it was aesthetically inconsistent with community standards and referenced bylaw section 7.3.2. He pulled out a second document. This is bylaw section 7.3.2. It addresses fence height requirements. There is no provision anywhere in Willowbrook's governing documents that regulates wheelchair ramps or accessibility modifications. Stephen leaned forward to examine the documents. His face went tight. Victoria, you told us this was a legitimate citation. It was a judgment call about visual, Victoria started. Based on a bylaw that doesn't exist, Marcus interrupted smoothly. Which brings us to January 2024. He laid out photographs side by side. My household received a citation for removing holiday decorations one day after the permitted deadline. Here's the timestamp on our takedown, January 6th at 2 p.m. The deadline was January 5th at midnight. He slid over another set of photos. This is Patricia Morrison's property. Her decorations remain displayed until January 19th, 2 full weeks past the deadline. No citation was ever issued. Patricia's face went red. Several residents turned to look at her. She was sitting right next to Victoria at the board table. Marcus continued without pausing. March 2024, we received a noise complaint regarding Elena's medical oxygen concentrator. He pulled up a decibel measurement chart on his laptop and turned it so the room could see. Elena's equipment operates at 45 decibels, roughly equivalent to a quiet library. For comparison, this is Mrs. Patterson's air conditioning unit, 3 houses down from Mrs. Ashford's property. 72 decibels, 50% louder. No complaints filed, no citations issued. How did you... Victoria's voice cracked slightly. You measured Patterson's AC unit. I documented everything, Marcus said simply. April 2024, you demanded medical documentation proving Elena's disability, despite her using a wheelchair that's visible to anyone with eyes. The ADA doesn't require disabled individuals to provide medical records to housing authorities unless they're requesting specific structural modifications beyond standard accessibility. He pulled out email exchanges. Here's your request for Elena's complete medical history, including diagnosis details and prognosis. Here's my response citing federal privacy law. Here's your follow-up email threatening escalated enforcement action if we didn't comply. David, the retired accountant on the board, was reading over Stephen's shoulder. We never saw these emails, Victoria. You said the Reed family was refusing reasonable accommodation requests. I was trying to verify legitimate need for... You were violating federal housing law, Marcus said. His tone remained calm, almost conversational, but there was steel underneath. June 2024, you ordered us to remove Elena's accessible parking signage, claiming it was unauthorized. Under the Fair Housing Act, reasonable accommodation for disability access must be granted unless it creates undue hardship. A parking sign creates no hardship. He was building the pattern now, piece by piece, and he could see the board members beginning to understand. This wasn't a neighborhood dispute. This was systematic discrimination, documented with prosecutorial precision. August 2024, Marcus continued. Formal complaint filed against our household for excessive visitor parking violations. The visitors in question were Elena's physical therapist and home health nurse, medical necessities. Meanwhile, Mrs. Ashford's book club meets every Thursday with 6 to 8 vehicles, consistently exceeding guest spot allocations. No violations ever filed. Make sure you're subscribed because what's about to happen next shows exactly why you should never assume someone's past based on their present. Marcus pulled out a thick spreadsheet. This document cross-references every citation issued by this HOA board over the past 2 years against actual bylaw violations. The Reed household received 17 citations. Of those 17, 14 referenced bylaws that either don't exist, don't apply, or were selectively enforced against us while identical violations by other residents were ignored. He turned to address the full room now, not just Victoria. My family has been systematically targeted for 2 years based on disability discrimination and what Mrs. Ashford perceives as economic or social unsuitability. Every citation, every complaint, every threatening email followed the same pattern. Enforce rules against us that don't apply to her friends. Victoria found her voice, though it shook. This is ridiculous. You're a custodian at the community center. You don't have the legal knowledge to... To what? Marcus met her eyes. To recognize housing discrimination? To document civil rights violations? To build a federal case? The room had gone completely silent. You're right that I work as a custodian, Marcus said quietly. I clean floors. I empty trash. I set up tables for events like Saturday's picnic. It's honest work, and I'm not ashamed of it. He paused. But before I took that job, I spent 12 years with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. I prosecuted Fair Housing Act violations in 3 states. I specialized in disability discrimination and predatory HOA enforcement. Victoria's face went white. I resigned from DOJ 3 years ago when my parents were killed and Elena was paralyzed in the same accident. She needed full-time care. My daughter needed a father who came home every night. So I walked away from a career prosecuting people exactly like you, Mrs. Ashford, and I took a job that let me be present for my family. He let that sink in for a moment. Several residents were staring at him like they'd never seen him before. In a way, they hadn't. You mistook my humility for ignorance, Marcus continued. You saw work boots and a custodial uniform and assumed I didn't understand the law. You were wrong. I understand it better than you ever will, and every single action you've taken against my family over the past 2 years violates federal housing protections that I spent over a decade enforcing. Stephen stood abruptly. Victoria, did you know any of this? No, he never... Victoria was stammering now, her composure cracking. He's been cleaning toilets for 3 years. How was I supposed to know? You weren't supposed to know, Marcus said, because it shouldn't matter. Whether I'm a federal attorney or a custodian, whether my sister is disabled or not, whether our family meets your social standards or not, the law protects us equally. That's the whole point of civil rights legislation. That's what I spent 12 years of my life defending. He pulled out one more document. This is a formal fair housing complaint, ready to file with HUD. It details every incident, every discriminatory action, every violation of federal law committed by this board under your leadership. If I submit this, HUD will investigate not just these specific incidents, but the entire Willowbrook HOA enforcement history. Every decision you've made as president will be scrutinized. Every citation you've issued will be examined for discriminatory patterns. Victoria was gripping the edge of the table. You can't. I absolutely can. Marcus's voice was steady. I know exactly how to file it, exactly which statutes apply, and exactly how the investigation process works. I've done it dozens of times. The question isn't whether I can, it's whether I will. The community center doors opened. Cassandra walked in, still wearing her judicial robes. Every head in the room turned. Cassandra moved with the quiet authority of someone who spent her days commanding courtrooms. The black judicial robe made her unmistakable. Not a lawyer, not an advocate, but a sitting judge. She carried her briefcase in one hand and walked directly to where Marcus stood at the front of the room. I apologize for being late, she said to the room at large. I had sentencing hearings this morning that I couldn't reschedule. Victoria's mouth opened and closed without sound. She stared at Cassandra like she was seeing a ghost. Cassandra set her briefcase down and looked directly at Victoria. I'm Judge Cassandra Liu Reed, County Superior Court, Family Division. She gestured to Marcus. Also Mr. Reed's wife. I wanted to be here for this discussion. The silence in the room was absolute. 40 people barely breathing. Victoria's voice came out as a whisper. You're married to the custodian? I'm married to Marcus Reed, Cassandra corrected, her tone pleasant but firm. Who happens to work as a custodian currently? Though, as he just explained, that's not what he's always done. She turned to address the full room. I need to be very clear about something. I cannot and will not intervene in HOA matters from the bench. That would be inappropriate and potentially unethical. I'm not here as a judge making official rulings. I'm here as a resident of this community and a witness to 2 years of systematic harassment against my family. Cassandra moved to stand beside Marcus. What I can do is provide context as someone who's observed these events and who understands the legal framework my husband just outlined. Because what happened Saturday wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a sustained pattern of discrimination. She looked at Victoria. Mrs. Ashford, I've watched you target my family for 2 years. The citation for Elena's wheelchair ramp that referenced non-existent bylaws, the noise complaints about medical equipment, the demands for private health information, the parking restrictions that violated reasonable accommodation requirements. Every action designed to make our family feel unwelcome. I was enforcing community standards, Victoria started. You were selectively enforcing arbitrary standards based on personal bias, Cassandra interrupted. And Saturday, you crossed a line from harassment into assault. You physically moved my sister-in-law's wheelchair without her consent, in front of 60 witnesses, including my 9-year-old daughter. Patricia tried to interject. Cassandra, Judge Liu, Victoria was trying to help. We all saw the video, Cassandra said calmly. There's no version of that footage where grabbing someone's wheelchair and yanking it backward constitutes help. There's only the version where it constitutes battery against a disabled person. Stephen was reading through Marcus's evidence, his face growing darker. Victoria, why didn't you bring any of this to full board review? These citations, half of them reference bylaws that don't exist. The other half show clear disparate treatment. I was handling routine enforcement. There's nothing routine about this. Stephen turned to the other board members. Did any of you review these citations before they were issued? David shook his head slowly. Patricia looked away. Jennifer mumbled something about trusting Victoria's judgment. So she's been acting unilaterally, Stephen said, making enforcement decisions without board oversight, targeting one family with fabricated violations while ignoring identical issues with her friends. He looked at Victoria. That's not leadership. That's abuse of authority. Marcus spoke again, his voice cutting through the tension. I need everyone here to understand what we're looking at legally. What Mrs. Ashford did Saturday is criminal battery under state law. The enhanced penalty for assault against a disabled individual makes it a more serious charge. My family could pursue criminal prosecution. He gestured to his documentation. Beyond that, this pattern of discriminatory enforcement constitutes violation of the Fair Housing Act at the federal level. The FHA prohibits housing discrimination based on disability status. It prohibits harassment intended to interfere with someone's right to housing. It prohibits retaliation against individuals who assert their rights under disability law. Cassandra added, if Marcus files a HUD complaint, which he has every legal right to do, the investigation won't be limited to these specific incidents. HUD will audit Willowbrook's entire enforcement history. They'll examine every citation issued, every bylaw interpretation, every board decision made during Mrs. Ashford's tenure as president. That could take years, David said quietly. The legal fees alone would bankrupt the HOA. Yes, Marcus confirmed. And if HUD finds systematic discrimination, which this evidence strongly suggests they would, the HOA faces significant fines, mandatory federal oversight, and potential civil liability to any other residents who were similarly targeted. Victoria finally found her voice, though it shook. You're threatening the entire community because of a personal dispute. No, Marcus said firmly. You threatened the entire community by running this HOA like your personal fiefdom. You created this liability through 2 years of discriminatory practices. I'm simply making everyone aware of the legal exposure you've generated. He pulled out another document. This is the formal complaint. It's complete. It includes every incident, every piece of supporting evidence, every witness statement. It's ready to file today if I choose to submit it. The room erupted in whispers, residents turning to each other, voices rising in concern and anger, mostly directed at Victoria now, not at the Reeds. Robert Chen stood. I move that we table any discussion of action against the Reed family and instead conduct an immediate review of the board president's enforcement practices. Seconded, someone called from the back. Victoria's hands were trembling. You can't just... This is my meeting. Actually, Stephen said, pulling out his own copy of the bylaws. Any board member can call for a vote on procedural matters. All in favor of tabling the Reed family discussion? Nearly every hand in the room went up. Motion carries. Stephen turned to Victoria. As acting vice president, I'm invoking emergency board authority to suspend any enforcement actions against the Reed household, pending full investigation into citation practices. You can't do that. Section 12.4 of the governing documents, Stephen said flatly. Emergency authority, when board president's actions may expose the HOA to legal liability. I'd say a potential federal discrimination lawsuit qualifies. Victoria looked around the room. Every face that had smiled at her 2 days ago now looked at her with suspicion or outright hostility. Her friends on the board were physically distancing themselves, shifting chairs, avoiding eye contact. She was alone. Marcus watched her realize it. The same isolation Elena had felt Saturday when the crowd walked away. The same helplessness Iris had experienced watching her aunt be assaulted while neighbors did nothing. Poetic justice felt exactly like this, watching someone experience the consequences they had inflicted on others. Cassandra touched Marcus's arm gently. "The legal framework is clear," she said to the room. "What happens next is up to Mrs. Ashford. My husband could pursue maximum legal action and be completely justified, or we could find another path, but that requires acknowledgement, accountability, and change." Victoria looked at Marcus, at Cassandra in her judicial robes, at the evidence spread across the table, at the room full of witnesses who'd watched her power evaporate in under an hour. "What do you want?" she whispered. Marcus had been waiting for that question. Marcus looked at Victoria for a long moment. She was everything he'd left behind when he resigned from the Department of Justice. The entitlement, the casual cruelty disguised as procedure, the assumption that power meant the right to harm people without consequences. 3 years ago, he would have pursued maximum penalties, filed every charge, pushed for the harshest investigation, made her an example. That's what prosecutors did. They won cases and moved on to the next one. But he wasn't that person anymore. He'd learned something in 3 years of being present for Iris, of caring for Elena, of doing work that people dismissed as menial. He'd learned that winning wasn't the same as making things right. "I want my sister to be able to live in this neighborhood without fear," Marcus said quietly. "I want my daughter to grow up knowing that standing up to bullies is right, even when it's hard. I want this community to understand that people's worth isn't measured by their job titles or their abilities or how well they fit someone's aesthetic standards." He gestured to the evidence on the table. "This documentation proves systematic discrimination. If I file it with HUD, you'll lose everything. Your reputation, your position, probably your home once the legal fees start accumulating. The entire HOA will suffer because you couldn't treat one family with basic human dignity." Victoria's face was pale. She gripped the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "But I don't want to punish the whole neighborhood for your failures," Marcus continued. "Most of these people are decent. They just didn't want the inconvenience of getting involved. So here's what's going to happen." He pulled out a handwritten document, something he'd drafted last night after Cassandra had gone to bed. "You're going to resign as HOA president, effective immediately. You're going to issue a written apology to Elena, acknowledging what you did Saturday and apologizing for 2 years of discriminatory harassment. You're going to complete a certified civil rights training course. I'll provide a list of approved programs. And you're going to have 0 contact with my family going forward. Not at community events, not in passing, not ever. And if I refuse..." Victoria's voice was barely audible. "Then I file the complaint this afternoon," Marcus said. "HUD opens an investigation. I simultaneously file criminal battery charges for Saturday's assault. I provide this video and all supporting documentation to local media because housing discrimination stories get excellent coverage. Your name becomes permanently associated with assaulting a disabled woman at a community picnic." Cassandra added, her voice gentle but implacable, "And I'll be watching. Not as a judge. I have no official role here. But as someone who knows how these investigations work, if you attempt any retaliation, any further harassment, any action that could be construed as retribution against my family or anyone who supported us today, I'll make sure Marcus files every available legal action." Stephen stood. "The board should vote on this. Mrs. Ashford, you're entitled to due process." "No," Victoria interrupted. Her voice was hollow. "No vote. I resign." The words hung in the air. "I resign as HOA president, effective immediately." Victoria wouldn't look at anyone. "I'll submit the written apology by end of business today. I'll enroll in whatever training program you specify, and I'll stay away from your family." Marcus nodded slowly. "There's one more thing." Victoria's head snapped up, fear flickering across her face. "Robert Chen recorded Saturday's incident," Marcus said. But he's not the only one with video. At least 4 other residents were filming the picnic when you assaulted Elena. I want copies of all footage from Saturday, submitted to the new board leadership, to be kept as part of the permanent HOA record. So if you ever decide memory is flexible, if you ever try to rewrite what happened, there's documentation that can't be disputed. Robert stood. I'll coordinate collection of all video evidence. We'll create a sealed file that requires full board approval to access. Seconded, someone called out. Victoria just nodded. She looked smaller now, diminished. The power she'd wielded so carelessly had evaporated, and without it, she was just a woman who'd made terrible choices and run out of people to blame. "This meeting is adjourned," Stephen said quietly. "Mrs. Ashford, please submit your formal resignation in writing within the hour. We'll schedule emergency elections for next week." People started standing, gathering belongings, whispering among themselves. Several residents approached Marcus and Cassandra, some to apologize, some to express support they'd been too afraid to offer. Saturday, some just to shake hands with people they were seeing clearly for the first time. Elena wheeled over to where Marcus stood. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "You okay?" Marcus asked. "I'm better than okay." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for fighting back, for showing Iris that we don't have to accept being treated like we're less than human." "Iris?" Marcus checked his phone. School pickup was in 20 minutes. He needed to go, needed to be there when the final bell rang, needed to maintain the routine that had defined his life for 3 years. "I have to get Iris," he told Cassandra. "Go," she said. "I'll finish up here." Marcus gathered his laptop and evidence folders. As he headed for the door, he passed Victoria, still sitting at the board table, staring at nothing. She looked up as he approached. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "About your background, about what you used to do." Marcus stopped. "It shouldn't have mattered. The law protects everyone equally. That's the whole point. Whether I was a federal attorney or a custodian, whether Elena is disabled or not, whether our family meets your social standards or not, we deserved basic respect. That's what you never understood." He started to walk away, then paused. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Ashford, I hope you actually do the training. I hope you learn something. Because the alternative, spending the rest of your life being the person who assaulted a disabled woman at a neighborhood picnic, that's not a legacy anyone should want." He left her sitting there and walked out into the late morning sunlight. The community center parking lot looked the same as it had an hour ago. His custodial uniform hung in his locker inside, waiting for his afternoon shift. In 3 hours, he'd be back here cleaning the same meeting room where he'd just dismantled Victoria's authority piece by methodical piece. The thought made him smile. He'd spent 3 years believing he'd left his old life behind, that the attorney he'd been and the custodian he'd become were 2 separate people who couldn't coexist. But this morning proved something different. He wasn't one or the other. He was both, always had been. The skills didn't disappear just because he stopped using them professionally. The instinct for justice didn't fade because he chose family over career. The ability to fight back didn't diminish because he'd chosen peace. He'd just needed the right battle to remember. Marcus drove to Iris's school, parked in the pickup line, and waited. When the bell rang and his daughter came running out, backpack bouncing, he scooped her up despite her protests that she was too big for this. "How was school?" he asked. "Good, we learned about fractions. Did you make the mean lady stop being mean?" Marcus set her down and opened the car door. "Yes, sweetheart, I did." "Good," Iris said firmly. She climbed into her booster seat. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" "Absolutely." They drove toward the ice cream shop, Iris chattering about math class and recess and her friend Emma's new puppy. Normal life. The life Marcus had chosen, the life that mattered more than any courtroom victory ever had. But now he knew something he hadn't known before. He could have both. The ice cream shop was nearly empty on a Monday afternoon. Marcus ordered Iris her usual, chocolate chip cookie dough with rainbow sprinkles, and got himself black coffee. They sat at the window table overlooking the street, the same spot they had claimed dozens of times over the past 3 years. Iris attacked her ice cream with the focused intensity only a 9-year-old could muster. Between bites, she asked, "Is Aunt Elena going to be okay now?" "Yeah, baby, she's going to be fine." "And the mean lady won't hurt her anymore?" "No, she won't." Marcus sipped his coffee. Mrs. Ashford resigned. That means she's not in charge of the neighborhood anymore. Someone else will do that job. Iris considered this, her spoon hovering halfway to her mouth. Did you get in trouble for making her resign? No, I just showed people what she'd been doing, how she'd been treating our family unfairly. Once everyone saw the truth, they understood she shouldn't be in charge anymore. Because she was mean to Aunt Elena. Because she was mean to Aunt Elena, Marcus confirmed. And because being in charge means you're supposed to help people and make things fair, not use your power to hurt people you don't like. Iris nodded sagely, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected about the world. Then she went back to her ice cream. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Cassandra. Meeting wrapped. Victoria submitted written resignation and apology. Stephen calling emergency elections for next Monday. Robert Chen nominated for president. You should see Elena's apology letter. It's thorough. I think Victoria's lawyer wrote it. Marcus smiled and texted back. Good. I'm with Iris. Home around 3. Another text came through, this one from Robert Chen. Thank you for today. I should have spoken up sooner. I'll do better going forward. Marcus stared at that message for a long moment. Robert wasn't the only one who should have spoken up sooner. 40 people had watched Elena get assaulted Saturday. Most of them had walked away. It was easier to mind your own business, to avoid confrontation, to let someone else deal with the problem. He understood that impulse. He'd spent 2 years following it himself. His phone buzzed again. Elena this time. Victoria's apology just arrived via email. Want to read it? Later, Marcus replied. Enjoying ice cream with my daughter. Elena sent back a heart emoji. When Iris finished her ice cream, they drove home. Elena was in the living room working on her laptop, and she looked up when they came in. Her eyes were brighter than Marcus had seen them in months. How was school? She asked Iris. Good. Daddy made the mean lady go away and we got ice cream. Iris dropped her backpack and ran to hug her aunt. Are you happy now? Elena held her tight. Yes, sweetheart. I'm happy now. After Iris went upstairs to change, Elena pulled up the apology letter on her laptop. Marcus read over her shoulder. It was formal, carefully worded, clearly reviewed by an attorney. Victoria acknowledged the assault, apologized for 2 years of discriminatory treatment, and committed to completing civil rights training within 60 days. It's generic, Marcus said, but it's on record. If she ever tries to claim otherwise, we have this in writing. Do you think she actually means it? Elena asked. Marcus thought about Victoria's face in the meeting room, the shock, the fear, the humiliation as her power dissolved in front of witnesses. I think she's scared. Whether that translates to actual change or just better hidden prejudice, I don't know. But at least she can't hurt us anymore. Because of you. Elena turned to look at him. You gave up. Everything for me 3 years ago. Your career, your salary, your whole identity. And today you used all of that to protect me again. You're my sister. That's what family does. Most people don't give up Department of Justice careers to become custodians. Most people don't have sisters worth protecting. Marcus closed the laptop. Besides, I didn't give up my identity. I just put it away for a while. Turns out it was still there when I needed it. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I've been thinking about something, starting a business. Doing what? ADA compliance consulting for HOAs and property management companies? Elena's voice gained energy as she talked. There are thousands of Victorias out there, people running housing communities who don't understand disability law, who think accessibility is a burden instead of a right. I could teach them, help them avoid violations before they happen. If you're still watching, make sure you're subscribed, because the transformation isn't over yet. Marcus smiled. That's brilliant. I've already got 3 inquiries. Word spreads fast in HOA circles, apparently. Everyone wants to avoid being the next Willowbrook. You're going to be busy. Good. I'm tired of being the victim in this story. Time to be the expert instead. Elena grinned. Plus, I'm charging premium rates. Victoria's mistakes are going to fund my entire first year of operations. They talked for another hour about Elena's business plans, about consulting rates and liability insurance and marketing strategies. Watching his sister reclaim agency, transform trauma into purpose, made something settle in Marcus's chest. This was why he'd fought today. Not for revenge, not even for justice, really. For this. For Elena, sitting in their living room talking about her future with excitement instead of fear. For Iris upstairs doing homework without wondering if tomorrow would bring another humiliation. For Cassandra coming home tonight to a family that was whole instead of wounded. Around 2:30, Marcus changed into his custodial uniform. Elena watched him pull on the work boots and navy blue shirt with Riverside Community Center embroidered on the pocket. "Doesn't it feel weird?" she asked. "Putting that on after this morning?" "This morning I wore a suit and prosecuted a federal case," Marcus said. "This afternoon I'm cleaning toilets and mopping floors. Yeah, it's weird, but it's also my life, both parts of it. You could go back, to legal work. After today, firms would hire you in a heartbeat." Marcus considered that. "Maybe someday, but right now, this job lets me pick up Iris from school every day. It lets me take you to physical therapy appointments. It lets me be present instead of just providing. That matters more than any career. Even after you remembered how good you are at it. Especially after I remembered how good I am at it." Marcus grabbed his keys. "Because now I know it's not gone. It's just waiting for when I need it, like today." He drove to the community center and checked in with his supervisor, a 50-year-old former construction worker named Dave who managed facilities maintenance. Dave was restocking cleaning supplies in the storage room when Marcus found him. "Heard there was some excitement at the HOA meeting this morning," Dave said casually. "News really did travel fast." "Yeah, got a little heated. Also heard you're not actually just a custodian." Dave grinned. "DOJ attorney, huh? Feel like I should have been calling you Mr. Reed instead of Marcus. Marcus is fine. The other stuff is just what I used to do. Used to do or still do when someone messes with your family." Dave handed him a mop and bucket. "Community room needs cleaning after the meeting. Figured you'd want to handle it yourself." Marcus took the supplies. "Thanks, Dave." "Hey, Marcus," Dave called as he headed out. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're on our side. Remind me never to piss you off." Marcus laughed and headed to the community room. It was empty now, chairs pushed back into rows, tables cleared. The same room where Victoria had tried to destroy his family's reputation 4 hours ago. The same room where he'd systematically dismantled her authority, piece by piece. He filled the bucket with warm water and cleaning solution, then started mopping methodically, working from the back corner forward. Physical work, honest work. The kind of labor people dismissed as menial, but that kept communities functioning. Marcus had learned something important in 3 years of custodial work. There was dignity in every job done well. He'd just also learned he could do multiple jobs well. And when his family needed protecting, he'd use every skill he had. Marcus was halfway through mopping when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find Stephen standing in the doorway, still wearing the same button-down shirt from the meeting. The mortgage broker looked uncomfortable, hands shoved in his pockets. "Got a minute?" Stephen asked. Marcus leaned the mop against the wall. "Sure." Stephen walked into the room, careful to avoid the wet floor. He looked around like he was seeing the space for the first time. The scuff marks on the linoleum, the water-stained ceiling tiles, the industrial cleaning cart in the corner. "I owe you an apology," Stephen said finally. "I've been on that board for 3 years. I signed off on those citations Victoria sent your family. I never questioned her, never asked to see the actual bylaws she was citing. I just trusted her judgment." "You weren't the only one," Marcus said. "That doesn't make it right." Stephen met his eyes. "I watched what happened Saturday. I saw her grab Elena's wheelchair, and I didn't do anything. I told myself it wasn't my business, that getting involved would just make things worse. Then I went home and forgot about it." Marcus waited. Stephen clearly had more to say. "This morning, change that," Stephen continued. "Watching you present that evidence, seeing how methodically she'd been targeting your family while I sat there enabling it, I can't pretend I didn't know anymore. I did know. I just chose not to act." "So what happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now I run the board differently." Stephen's voice firmed up. "I'm calling for a complete audit of every citation issued in the past 3 years. We're reviewing all enforcement decisions for patterns of discrimination. And I'm proposing new bylaws that require full board review before any violations are issued. No more unilateral enforcement." "That's a good start. Robert Chen is going to win the presidency election next week," Stephen said. He's already talking about mandatory civil rights training for all board members, creating a formal appeals process for residents who feel they've been unfairly cited, bringing in outside consultants to review our governing documents for ADA compliance. Marcus nodded. Elena's starting a consulting business in exactly that field. ADA compliance for HOAs. Stephen's eyebrows rose. Would she be willing to work with Willowbrook? We'd pay her professional rates, of course. It's the least we can do after... He gestured vaguely, unable to finish the sentence. I'll ask her, Marcus said. But Stephen, you should know, Elena doesn't want charity. If she takes the job, it'll be because Willowbrook actually needs the work done, not because you're trying to make amends. Understood, and we do need it. That's what this morning proved. We've been operating on assumptions and outdated practices for years. Time to fix that properly. Stephen turned to leave, then paused. Can I ask you something? Why didn't you tell anyone about your background, about being a federal attorney? Marcus picked up the mop again. Because I didn't want to be that person anymore. I was tired of fighting, tired of seeing the worst in people every single day. When my parents died and Elena needed me, leaving the DOJ felt like an escape, not a sacrifice. But you're good at it, Stephen said. What you did this morning, that was masterful. You could be making 6 figures at any firm in the state. I could, Marcus agreed, but I'd also be working 70-hour weeks, missing Iris's school plays, being too exhausted to help Elena with her physical therapy. Money isn't everything. Still, cleaning floors when you could be arguing federal cases is honest work that lets me be present for my family, Marcus finished. I'm not ashamed of what I do, Stephen. I'm just also not limited by it. That's what Victoria never understood. She saw the uniform and assumed that's all I was. But people are more than their current job titles. Stephen nodded slowly. Message received, and Marcus, thank you for fighting back, for not just filing that HUD complaint and burning down the whole neighborhood. You had every right to pursue maximum penalties. Winning isn't the same as making things right, Marcus said. I learned that today. After Stephen left, Marcus finished mopping. The rhythmic work gave him time to think about what came next. Victoria's resignation was just the beginning. Real change required follow-through, new policies, actual enforcement, cultural shift in how the community treated vulnerable residents. He'd built the foundation this morning. Now, others needed to construct the rest. His phone buzzed. Cassandra. Emergency board meeting tonight at 7. They're drafting interim policies and want your input. Can you make it? Marcus checked the time. 4:30. He could finish his shift, go home, have dinner with his family, and still make a 7 o'clock meeting. I'll be there, he texted back. Wear the suit, Cassandra replied. You've earned it. Marcus smiled. He finished mopping, emptied the bucket, and returned the cleaning supplies to storage. Dave was in the office doing paperwork when Marcus stopped by. Heading out? Dave asked. Yeah, full shift done. See you tomorrow. Hey, Marcus? Dave looked up from his computer. Whatever happens with this HOA thing, with people knowing what you used to do, you're still good here, right? Still want to work maintenance? The question caught Marcus off guard. You think I'd quit? I think you got options now that people didn't know you had before. Wouldn't blame you for taking them. Marcus considered that. Did he want to keep cleaning floors now that the neighborhood knew he'd prosecuted federal cases? Did maintaining this job make sense when he could be using his legal expertise? I like this work, Marcus said finally. It's simple, straightforward. I clean something dirty and it's clean. No moral ambiguity, no complex legal arguments, no wondering if justice actually got served. Just work that matters because communities need to be maintained. Plus it lets you be home for your kid, Dave added. Plus that, Marcus agreed. So yeah, I'm still good here. Unless you're firing me for causing drama, Dave laughed. Are you kidding? You're the most interesting employee I've ever had. Former DOJ attorney who chose mopping floors over courtrooms? That's either crazy or enlightened. I'm betting on enlightened. Marcus clocked out and drove home. Cassandra's car was already in the driveway. She'd left court early. Inside, he found her in the kitchen with Elena, both of them looking at a laptop screen. What's this? Marcus asked. Contract, Elena said, turning the screen so he could see. Stephen just sent it over. Willowbrook wants to hire me to conduct a full ADA compliance audit and create updated accessibility policies. 3-month contract, $20,000. Marcus whistled. That's significant. It's professional rates, Elena said firmly. I'm not taking a penny less than I'm worth. If they want expertise, they're paying for expertise. Good, Marcus said. You've earned it. Cassandra stood and kissed him. How was mopping the same floor where you destroyed Victoria's entire worldview this morning? Weirdly satisfying, Marcus admitted. Like closing a circle. I prosecuted the case, then I cleaned up the mess, full service. They laughed, and it felt good. Normal, like maybe they could actually move past this and find equilibrium again. Board meeting at 7, Cassandra reminded him. They want you there for policy discussion. I know, I'll change and grab dinner first. Marcus looked at his family, his wife, his sister, the life he'd built by choosing them over career advancement. Thank you both for believing I could do this, for not trying to talk me down from confrontation. You needed to fight, Elena said simply. We all needed you to fight. Well, Marcus said, let's make sure the fight actually accomplished something permanent. Tonight, he'd help build the policies that would prevent another Victoria from abusing power. Tomorrow, he'd go back to cleaning floors and being present for Iris. And somehow, impossibly, both things would be true at once. He was a custodian and a civil rights attorney, a father and a fighter, a man who'd chosen humility and remembered how to wield authority. All of it, at the same time, finally. The emergency board meeting started precisely at 7. Marcus arrived in the suit again, carrying a leather portfolio Cassandra had given him years ago, when he'd made senior trial attorney at the DOJ. It felt strange and familiar at once, like putting on a costume that used to be his actual skin. The meeting room was different now. Only 8 people present, the 4 remaining board members, Robert Chen, 2 residents who'd volunteered for the Policy Review Committee, and Marcus. No crowd, no spectacle. Just people trying to fix a broken system. Stephen called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming on short notice. We're here to draft interim enforcement policies that will govern Willowbrook until we can implement comprehensive reforms. Marcus, we'd like your input, given your expertise in housing law. Marcus opened his portfolio. He'd spent an hour before dinner drafting a framework based on Fair Housing Act requirements and best practices from his DOJ days. The core issue isn't the bylaws themselves, it's enforcement discretion. Victoria had unilateral authority to interpret rules, issue citations, and determine violations. That's where discrimination happens, in the gap between written policy and individual judgment. He distributed copies of his proposal. This framework requires 3 things. First, mandatory board review before any citation is issued. One person's interpretation gets checked by committee consensus. Second, written justification for every enforcement decision, referencing specific bylaw sections and including photographic evidence. Creates a paper trail that prevents selective application. Third, a formal appeals process where residents can challenge citations and have them reviewed by the full board. Patricia, who'd been silent all evening, spoke up hesitantly. Won't that slow down enforcement? What if someone's violating rules in a way that creates immediate problems? Emergency violations get expedited review, Marcus explained. Safety hazards, property damage, things that can't wait. But aesthetic complaints, parking disputes, noise issues, those can wait 48 hours for proper board assessment. What we lose in speed, we gain in fairness. David, the retired accountant, was reading through the proposal. This is comprehensive. You drafted this tonight? I've drafted similar policies before, Marcus said. Federal housing programs require enforcement frameworks that prevent discrimination. This adapts those principles to HOA governance. Robert leaned forward. What about accountability for past violations? People who were unfairly cited under Victoria's enforcement. I propose automatic review of all citations issued in the past 2 years, Marcus said. Any that can't be justified under these new standards get expunged from resident records. Fines already paid get refunded. Essentially, a clean slate. Stephen looked up sharply. That could be expensive. We're talking dozens of citations, potentially thousands in refunds. It's cheaper than a federal lawsuit, Marcus said bluntly. And it's the right thing to do. You can't claim to be reforming while letting past injustices stand. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Jennifer, who'd barely spoken during the morning meeting, said, "My son got away with vandalism last summer because I'm friends with Victoria, while other kids got cited for skateboarding in the parking lot. If we're doing this, we need to acknowledge that the problem wasn't just targeting some people unfairly. It was also protecting others unfairly." Marcus nodded. Disparate treatment works both ways. Enforcing rules against some while ignoring violations by others creates the same discriminatory pattern. They worked through the proposal for the next hour, refining language, adding provisions, debating implementation timelines. Marcus found himself slipping back into attorney mode, precise language, anticipating challenges, building frameworks that could withstand scrutiny. But it felt different than it had at the DOJ. Less adversarial, more collaborative. He wasn't prosecuting anyone. He was helping build something better. Around 8:30, they had a draft policy. Stephen called for a vote. It passed unanimously. "This takes effect immediately," Stephen said. "All pending citations are suspended pending board review. All new enforcement actions follow this framework. And Marcus, would you be willing to train the board on Fair Housing Act compliance? We'll compensate your time at professional rates." Marcus hesitated. Part of him wanted to say yes. This was important work. Work he was good at. Work that mattered. But another part remembered why he'd left this career in the first place. "I'll do the initial training," he said carefully. "But long-term, you should hire a professional consultant. My sister Elena is starting an ADA compliance business. She's more qualified than I am for ongoing HOA education." "We've already contracted with her for the accessibility audit," Stephen said. "Could she expand that to include fair housing training?" "Ask her, but I suspect yes." Marcus closed his portfolio. "Just remember, she's not doing this as a favor. She's a professional consultant who charges professional rates." "Understood," Stephen said. "We want to pay for expertise, not charity." The meeting adjourned shortly after. As people gathered their things, Robert approached Marcus. "Can I ask you something?" Robert said quietly. "Why didn't you just file the HUD complaint? You had ironclad evidence. You could have made Victoria pay for everything she did." Marcus thought about that. "Because punishment isn't the same as prevention. I could have destroyed Victoria personally, cost the HOA tens of thousands in legal fees, put the whole neighborhood through a federal investigation. That would have felt satisfying, but it wouldn't have fixed the system that let her abuse power in the first place. So this was always about changing the system, not punishing one person. This was about making sure what happened to my sister never happens to anyone else." Marcus picked up his portfolio. "Victoria's gone. That's enough. Now we build something better in her place." Robert nodded slowly. "I should have helped Saturday. I should have done more than just film it." "You did help. That video was crucial evidence." Marcus put a hand on Robert's shoulder. "But I understand the guilt. I spent 2 years watching her target my family and telling myself that keeping quiet was protecting them. Turns out I was wrong. Sometimes protection requires confrontation." "Lesson learned," Robert said. "When I'm board president, I won't forget it." Marcus drove home through quiet streets. Willowbrook looked the same as always. Manicured lawns, decorative streetlights, the manufactured perfection of planned community living. But something had shifted underneath. The rules were changing. The culture was changing. One confrontation couldn't transform an entire community overnight, but it could crack the foundation enough that new growth became possible. He pulled into his driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at his house. Lights on in the living room where Cassandra was probably reading. Elena's bedroom window glowing blue from her laptop screen. Iris's room dark, already asleep on a school night. His family safe, whole, vindicated, worth every minute of the fight. Marcus went inside. Cassandra looked up from her book as he entered. "How'd it go?" she asked. "We drafted new enforcement policies, mandatory board review, written justifications, formal appeals process, everything I would have recommended if I were still at DOJ." "So, you're consulting now?" Cassandra smiled. "Attorney by night, custodian by day?" "Something like that." Marcus sat beside her on the couch. "They want me to do fair housing training for the board. I said I'd do initial training, but they should hire Elena for ongoing work." "Passing the opportunity to your sister? She needs clients. I need to not become the neighborhood's go-to legal expert. One battle was enough." Marcus leaned back. I want to go back to being the guy who cleans floors and picks up his kid from school. Just also the guy who knows how to fight if his family needs protecting. Cassandra set down her book and took his hand. I think you've earned that balance. They sat quietly for a while, the comfortable silence of people who'd been through something hard together and come out intact. Finally, Marcus said, Do you think Victoria learned anything, or did we just scare her into compliance? Does it matter? Cassandra asked. Real change comes from changed systems, not changed hearts. If she's bitter and resentful but can't act on it anymore, that's still progress. Cynical. Realistic. Cassandra squeezed his hand. You built a system that prevents abuse. Whether the abuser actually becomes a better person is her problem, not yours. Marcus supposed that was true. He'd done what he could, fixed what was fixable, protected his family, and prevented future harm. Everything else was someone else's battle. The following week passed in a strange blur of normalcy, punctuated by aftershocks. Tuesday morning, Marcus returned to his custodial shift. Dave greeted him with coffee and a knowing smile, but didn't mention the HOA situation. Marcus cleaned the community center's restrooms, emptied trash cans, and replaced burned-out light bulbs in the parking lot fixtures. The work was exactly as mundane as it had been before, but he felt different doing it. Less invisible, more intentional. Several community center patrons recognized him now. Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down actually apologized in the lobby, saying she hadn't known Victoria was targeting his family. Marcus accepted graciously and moved on. He didn't need apologies. He needed people to do better next time. Wednesday brought the special election. Robert Chen won the board presidency with 42 of 47 votes. His acceptance speech was brief: reform, accountability, and transparency. The new board's first official act was ratifying the enforcement policy framework Marcus had drafted. Their second was contracting Elena for a comprehensive 6-month accessibility and fair housing compliance program. Thursday, Elena conducted her first site inspection of Willowbrook common areas. Marcus watched from the community center window as she wheeled through the neighborhood with a clipboard and measuring tape, documenting every curb cut, every ramp slope, every accessibility feature that met code and everyone that didn't. She looked professional, confident, like someone who'd transformed trauma into expertise. Friday afternoon, Marcus was restocking paper towels in the women's restroom when his phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Victoria Ashford. I've completed the civil rights training you required. Certificate attached. I'm also listing my house for sale. I'll be out of Willowbrook by end of month. I wanted you to know. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. She didn't have to tell him she was leaving. The agreement only required resignation, apology, and training. Moving out was her choice. He typed back, understood. Good luck with the sale. He almost left it there, then added, I hope the training was worthwhile. Her response came 5 minutes later. It was educational. I learned that good intentions aren't a defense against harmful actions. That's something I'll carry forward. Marcus showed the exchange to Cassandra that evening. She read it twice, then handed his phone back. Think she means it? Marcus asked. I think she's trying to salvage her self-image, Cassandra said. Whether that translates to genuine change or just better disguised prejudice, time will tell. But she's removing herself from situations where she has power over vulnerable people. That's something. Saturday morning, Iris had a soccer game. Marcus stood on the sideline with the other parents, cheering as his daughter sprinted up the field. Several Willowbrook neighbors were there. Children on the same team, families they had lived near for 2 years without really knowing. Robert Chen approached during halftime. Wanted to give you a heads up. The board reviewed all citations from the past 2 years like you recommended. We're expunging 43 of them and issuing refunds totaling $8,000. 43? Marcus was surprised. I knew Victoria was targeting us, but I didn't realize... It wasn't just your family, Robert said quietly. We found patterns against anyone she considered undesirable. Single mothers, elderly residents with mobility issues. The Chens, because we're not white. She hid it well. But the documentation doesn't lie. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had known Victoria was discriminatory. He hadn't realized how widespread her abuse had been. Are the other families pursuing action? Marcus asked. Most just want the citations removed and their money back. A few are considering complaints, but... Robert shrugged. She's gone. The system's fixed. People want to move on. I get that, Marcus said, and he did. Not everyone wanted to fight. Some people just wanted peace restored. The soccer game resumed. Iris scored a goal in the final minutes, and Marcus cheered so loud his voice cracked. Watching his daughter play, standing among neighbors who finally saw his family as belonging, knowing they were safe, this was what mattered. Sunday evening, the family gathered for dinner. Cassandra made her famous lasagna. Elena brought a bottle of wine to celebrate her first week of consulting income. Iris regaled them with elaborate stories about playground politics and who was friends with whom this week. Normal life, the kind Marcus had been protecting all along. After Iris went to bed, the three adults sat in the living room. Elena had her laptop open, reviewing contract proposals from 3 other HOAs who'd heard about Willowbrook and wanted similar compliance audits. I'm going to need help if this keeps growing, Elena said. Maybe hire an assistant, possibly contract with accessibility specialists for technical inspections. That's good, Marcus said. Really good. It's weird, Elena admitted. 2 weeks ago, I was the victim in this story. Now I'm building a career out of what happened, turning the worst experience into professional expertise. That's not weird, Cassandra said. That's resilience. Elena smiled. I guess. Still feels surreal sometimes. Like I'm supposed to still be traumatized, but instead I'm booked solid through March. You can be both, Marcus said. Healing and successful aren't mutually exclusive. They sat quietly for a while, comfortable in the silence. Then Elena asked the question Marcus had been avoiding all week. Are you going back to law? Marcus looked at his sister, then at his wife, both watching him carefully. I don't know, he said honestly. Part of me wants to. The work this week felt right, building those policies, training the board, using expertise I'd buried for 3 years. It reminded me why I went into civil rights law in the first place. But, Cassandra prompted, but I also love picking Iris up from school every day. I love having time to help Elena with appointments. I love work that ends when my shift ends, that doesn't follow me home or wake me up at 3 a.m. worrying about case strategy. Marcus spread his hands. I don't know how to be both things simultaneously. Maybe you don't have to choose, Elena said. Maybe you do limited consulting. Take cases that matter. Turn down everything else. Use the expertise when it's needed. Let it rest when it's not. Contract work instead of full-time practice, Cassandra added. You could maintain the custodial job for stability and insurance, do legal consulting on the side for cases that align with your values. Marcus considered that. Hybrid approach. Why not? Cassandra smiled. You've already proven you can be a custodian and a civil rights attorney at the same time. This just makes it official. The idea settled over Marcus like a comfortable coat. He didn't have to abandon the life he'd built. He didn't have to fully return to the career he'd left. He could exist in the space between, drawing on both identities as needed. I'd want to be selective, Marcus said slowly. Only take cases involving housing discrimination or disability rights. Nothing corporate, nothing that's just about money. Your reputation from this week will bring those cases to you, Cassandra said. Word's already spreading in legal circles. The DOJ attorney who became a custodian and took down an abusive HOA president, that's a story people remember. Marcus laughed. Great. So much for staying invisible. You were never invisible, Elena said. You just convinced yourself you were because it felt safer than being seen. She was right. He'd hidden behind the custodial uniform, using it as armor against expectations and responsibility. But Victoria had stripped that armor away, and underneath he'd found he was still the same person he'd always been. A fighter when fighting mattered, a father when his daughter needed him, a brother when his sister required protection. All of it, simultaneously. Monday morning arrived with pale autumn sunlight. Marcus woke early, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with his laptop. He drafted an email to 3 legal aid organizations he'd worked with during his DOJ years, letting them know he was available for limited consulting on housing discrimination cases. Then he changed into his custodial uniform and went to work. Both things could be true. He was learning to live in that truth. 2 weeks after Victoria's resignation, Marcus stood on his front porch with his morning coffee, watching Willowbrook wake up. The neighborhood looked the same. Manicured lawns, designer mailboxes, the carefully maintained aesthetic that had always defined this place. But the atmosphere had shifted. People waved now, made eye contact, treated his family like they belonged instead of like problems to be managed. Small changes, significant ones. Victoria's house 3 streets over had a "for sale" sign planted in the yard. Marcus had driven past it yesterday on his way home from work. The fountain in her front yard was turned off, the windows dark. She'd already moved out, apparently, couldn't wait for the house to sell before leaving. He didn't feel triumph looking at that sign, just relief. She was gone. The system that enabled her was being rebuilt. His family was safe. That was enough. Elena wheeled out onto the porch, laptop balanced on her knees. "Morning, you're up early." "Couldn't sleep," Marcus admitted. "Too much thinking." "About?" "Everything. How fast things changed, how different life feels now." He sipped his coffee. 3 weeks ago, I was invisible. Now I'm the guy who took down the HOA president. It's weird." "You were never invisible," Elena said. "People just weren't looking." "Same thing, isn't it?" "No." Elena opened her laptop, pulled up her business website. "Invisible means you're not there. People not looking means they're choosing not to see. That's on them, not you." Marcus considered that distinction. She was right. He'd existed all along, caring for his family, doing honest work, living with quiet dignity. Victoria and others had chosen not to see those things, because acknowledging them would have contradicted their assumptions about job titles and worth. "Speaking of being seen," Elena said, "I got another inquiry this morning. HOA in Riverside wants a full compliance audit. That's 6 contracts now. I'm going to need to hire help." "That's incredible. It's your fault, really." Elena smiled. "You made housing discrimination visible in a way people couldn't ignore. Now, everyone's worried they're the next Victoria Ashford, so they're hiring consultants to make sure they're actually compliant instead of just thinking they are. Turning your trauma into a thriving business," Marcus observed. "I'm proud of you." "Learned it from you." Elena met his eyes. "You turned your trauma into protection. When Mom and Dad died, when I got hurt, you could have fallen apart. Instead, you became exactly what I needed. That taught me something about resilience." They sat quietly for a moment, siblings who'd survived the same losses and found different ways to rebuild. Iris burst through the front door, already dressed for school. "Daddy, can Emma come over after school? Her mom said it's okay if you say yes." "Sure, sweetheart. Text Emma's mom and confirm pickup time." Iris hugged him and ran back inside, shouting something to Cassandra about snacks. "She's different too," Elena observed. "More confident, less worried." "She watched her aunt get assaulted and then watched her father fight back," Marcus said. "That teaches a lesson too. That dignity is worth defending. That fighting back is sometimes necessary." "Good lessons," Elena said. "Better than the ones we were teaching before." Cassandra came out with her own coffee, still in her robe despite having court in 2 hours. She sat on the porch swing, looking satisfied. "What?" Marcus asked. "Just appreciating the moment," Cassandra said. "My family is safe. My husband remembers who he is. My sister-in-law is building an empire. My daughter is thriving. This is what winning looks like." She was right. This quiet morning on the porch, drinking coffee while the neighborhood woke up, knowing they belonged here, this was victory. Not dramatic or spectacular, just real and permanent and earned. Marcus's phone buzzed. An email from one of the legal aid organizations he'd contacted. They had a case. Family with autistic child being denied reasonable accommodations by their landlord. Would Marcus be willing to consult? He read the case summary, feeling the familiar pull of work that mattered. Then he checked his custodial shift schedule. He could do both. Consult on the case during his days off, maintain his regular work schedule, stay present for Iris and Elena. He could be both people. "Legal aid wants me for a case," Marcus said. "Disability discrimination, family being evicted because their kid needs accommodations." "You taking it?" Cassandra asked. Marcus thought about the family in that email, about how they probably felt helpless right now, facing an authority figure who didn't see their worth, who viewed their child's needs as burdens rather than rights. He'd been there. He knew what that helplessness felt like. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I'm taking it." Over. The next hour, the family prepared for their day. Cassandra dressed for court. Elena compiled inspection reports for tomorrow's client presentation. Iris practiced her spelling words at the kitchen table. Marcus changed into his custodial uniform, grabbed his work boots, checked that his laptop was charged for case research later. Normal life, the kind he'd chosen, the kind he'd fought to protect. Before leaving for work, Marcus stopped in Iris's room. She was making her bed, humming some song from school. "Hey, sweetheart, remember when you asked why Daddy stopped being a lawyer?" Iris looked up. "You said taking care of Aunt Elena was more important." "That's true. But I want you to understand something else. Just because you stop doing something doesn't mean you lose the ability. The things you learn, the person you become, that stays with you even when your job changes. Like how you were still a lawyer, even when you were cleaning floors?" "Exactly like that." Marcus knelt beside her. "So, whatever you choose to do when you grow up, remember? You're not just one thing. You're everything you've ever been and everything you choose to become, all at once." Iris hugged him tight. "I'm glad you remembered you could fight back, Daddy." "Me too, baby." Marcus drove to work with the windows down, letting autumn air fill the car. At the community center, Dave was already unloading supplies from the storage room. "Morning, Marcus. Ready for another exciting day of toilet maintenance?" "Absolutely," Marcus said, and meant it. He cleaned restrooms and mopped hallways and replaced air filters, doing work that kept communities functioning. Honest work, necessary work, work that let him be home when Iris got off the school bus, let him help Elena with physical therapy appointments, let him be present instead of absent. But when his shift ended and he went home, he opened his laptop and started researching disability accommodation law for the legal aid case. Using expertise that had never really disappeared, just waited for the right moment to resurface. He was a custodian who understood the dignity of labor, and an attorney who fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Both things, simultaneously. Finally. That evening, after dinner and homework and bedtime stories, Marcus stood on the porch again. The neighborhood was dark now, streetlights casting soft pools of illumination on empty sidewalks. Somewhere out there, other families were facing their own Victorias. Other people were being judged by job titles instead of character, being dismissed because they didn't fit someone's narrow vision of worth. Marcus couldn't fight every battle, but he could fight some. And now he knew something he'd forgotten. The best victories weren't about destroying your enemies. They were about building systems that prevented the next enemy from causing harm. Subscribe and don't miss our next story, because every single day, someone who's been underestimated is about to remind the world exactly who they are. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the moment when quiet dignity becomes unstoppable force. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next? Marcus went inside to his family, to the life he'd built and defended, to the future that was finally completely his own. Both the life he'd chosen and the person he'd always been. All of it. Finally whole.